to this effect in the committee. I thought it should have passed, and it would have helped with a flawed bill, but it was voted down. I know he's working even harder now, and whatever he proposes will be the kind of legislation that would strengthen this bill. Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent that the chair grant privileges of the floor to Joseph McCormick of the Budget Committee for the remainder of the first session of the 113th Congress.
Without objection.
Madam President, I share with the American people a deep frustration with the current failed operation of our immigration system and share some fundamental principles of immigration reform that have been expressed by the Gang of Eight. The gang has said that the current system is broken. I agree. But more accurately, we should say the current law and procedures are not being properly carried out and are resulting in monumental illegality in our country, something that is not worthy of a great nation. The gang says we must toughen our approach to border security and that we can do better. They implicitly, even openly, acknowledge that our government officials have long failed, a long history of failed border enforcement, and that they cannot be reasonably trusted to enforce the law. So even when the American people plead with our government to do something about the illegality, for decades this government has failed to do so. So I agree that the gang has touched on something important there. The gang acknowledges, in effect, the governing class and the activists and special interests want amnesty, and that these groups lack interest in or a will to sustain a policy of fair enforcement in the future. They say we've got to guard against that that's what has happened before. They acknowledge that. And I agree. To ensure that amnesty, which they favor for humanitarian as well as other issues, does not take effect immediately with only promised enforcement in the future, which never occurs, it seems, as has happened in the 1987 amnesty bill. They have therefore promised that they have laws and triggers that amnesty will not result unless the enforcement occurs. That's the promise. We've got triggers and we've got mechanisms so that you can't get amnesty unless enforcement occurs. And we have a guarantee of that, and we'll ensure that that happens. So I agree with the sentiment in this concern because we know what's been happening. I've been engaged in this debate since I've been in the Senate. But I do not agree that their legislation comes close to fulfilling this promise. It just does not. That is the rub. The comprehensive immigration bill does not fix our failing system. The provisions, the faux triggers, the expression of interest in fencing commissions will work no better than current law. It will not end the illegality in the future. So I'll discuss some of the flaws in their plan today, but I want to make one thing clear. I think most Americans believe in immigration. I know they do. Most Americans are concerned about people who've been here a very long time and had no real problems in their lives other than the immigration illegality. And they're prepared to reach out and do some compassionate things for them to give them a legal status that allows them to raise their family and their children who would become citizens. They're willing to do that. But they are concerned about the future. And will we end up again like 1986 when a bill is passed that promises enforcement and never occurs, but the amnesty occurs immediately, and then the promises in the future does not? What was Wimpy's line? I'll be glad to pay you tomorrow for a hamburger today. I'm glad to say we will have enforcement tomorrow, but I want the amnesty today in concrete. A recent Rasmussen poll explains how the people view this issue, actually within the last few days. By 4-to-1 margin, people say the enforcement should come first. Yes, they're willing to be compassionate, willing to wrestle through a fair and decent way to treat people, But they do believe that enforcement should come first because we've not had it before. Now, on this point, the instincts of our citizens are correct. Their compassion is real. Their respect for the rule of law is real. They know amnesty has erosive, corrosive impacts on the rule of law. And we have to be very, very diligent to ensure that in the future we're not creating the kind of events that erode our law even more. People are not biased. They approve of our system of 1 million people immigrating here every year, but they do want the system followed fairly. And the Gang of Eight, in their public statements, seem to say that's what good policy should be. That's what they've been talking about. That's what they expect the American people to hear about their legislation. That's what they've promised them they're working on, and that has been produced and laid out here. They say that they, too, are upset about what's happening, and they say their plan will end the illegality in the future, and it's the toughest immigration law in history. One senator of the gang in the committee said it was tough as nails. Thus, without equivocation, they say we must have enforcement, but it's in the future. And we got a plan that you can sleep well at night and know it's going to happen. So that's the fundamental test of where we are in this legislation. There are a lot of problems with the bill, a lot of really serious problems, and we'll talk about them. But I think fundamentally the question is just that. Have our sponsors laid forth a strategy that will work? So let's examine the key components of any system that's laid out here, see how it deals with them. Now, there are two ways to become a illegal resident of America. One is to come by visa, overstay that visa, just don't go home. 40% of the people here illegally today came legally by visa, but they've just refused to go back home when the time of their visa expires. And the other way is simply to cross the border illegally. And we've had that by the millions in recent years. This legislation does not fix the enforcement defects of either one of those entry methods. It does not fix each one of them. And I have studied this. It can be done. We can fix both of them. It's within our grasp. It's something that we can accomplish. And I'd like to see us do so. Unfortunately, analysis of this bill shows we've got a problem. Well, first, the Gang of Eight's written principles that they announced at the beginning of their discussions said that the path to citizenship in their bill would be, quote, contingent upon securing the borders and tracking whether illegal immigrants have left the country when required, close quote. So that's both areas, the visa failure to leave and the illegal crossing of the border. And Senator Rubio went so far as to say that, quote, the process of legalization, none of that happens. None of the legalization happens until we have been able to certify that indeed the workplace security thing is in place. The visa tracking is in place. And there's some level of operational control at the border. And that was in January of this year. Well, that's right. We shouldn't be doing this until we can certify and we know we've got this system under control. But around the same time, it was reported that Frank Sherry, the head of the pro-amnesty group America's Voice, said that Democrat senators privately reassured amnesty advocates that the Border Commission, that's one of the things they promise in this bill to ensure enforcement, one of the so-called triggers would not be, quote, constructed in a way that would hold up the amnesty process for too long. He said that Democrats cannot, quote, allow the Commission to have a real veto over setting in motion the path to citizenship. He also noted that the Democrats see the Commission as, quote, something that gives the Republicans a talking point, close quote. A talking point. to claim that they are prioritizing tough enforcement, giving themselves cover to back a process that, quote, won't stop people from getting citizenship, close quote. In other words, the gang apparently seemed to be quite happy to allow people to go out and make these promises, but to the people who are actively engaged for amnesty, they said, don't worry about it. It's not going to keep anybody from getting their full legality and eventually citizenship. And this should be a concern because American people are unhappy with their government. The American people have asked for a lawful system of immigration for 30 years, and the Congress has refused to do so. And they passed laws that they said will work and never have them effectively carried out, never effectively end in the illegality, and the American people are unhappy about it. I suggest that Mr. Sherry's statement is a good indication that the people who behind this bill, particularly the staff and special interest and lawyers who've come together from all kinds of groups to help write the bill, don't care about enforcement in the future. All they care about is what they want today. And that's letting the cat out of the bag. And the American people need to be very nervous about it. They have every right to be, because I'll talk about the history of some of the things that have been happening, and it should make every American concerned. Shortly before the bill was introduced, the lead sponsor, Senator Schumer, frankly and openly, and this is after the initial comments, openly on Meet the Press said this, quote, first the people will be legalized, then we'll make sure the border is secure, close quote. So it's undisputed the bill provides amnesty first without a single border security or enforcement measure ever having to be put in place. On Sunday, in an interview with Univision, Senator Rubio said, quote, first comes legalization, then comes this border security measure, and then comes the permanent residency process. What we're talking about here is the permanent residency system. Regarding legalization, a vast majority of my colleagues have already accepted that it must take place and that it must start at the same time. We start with what has to do with security. That's not conditional. Legalization is not conditional, close quote. What he is saying is that there's no condition in this bill, no requirement of any security to be achieved before the legalization occurs. The legalization occurs without condition, and then it's just a mere promise in the future to effectuate a legal system that we haven't done for the last 30 years. Even the Wall Street Journal agrees with that analysis. Indeed, nothing at all needs to happen for those eligible for the DREAM Act and for agricultural workers to receive the amnesty process. Their process, which covers roughly 4 million people, 40% of those almost who would be admitted and given legal status, is not connected in any way to any trigger or enforcement measure whatsoever. The American people reject such a policy. That's not what they've asked for, and that's what the June 7th Rasmussen poll said. The Rasmussen report says this, the bill, quote, legalizes the status of immigrants first and promises to secure the border later. By a 4-to-1 margin, voters want that order reversed, close quote. That's the polling data, and I think that's a good response from the American people. They know the system has been manipulated before. And I see our majority leader. I know he's a very busy man. I had sometime Senator Reid left before the 5 o'clock, but if you had something that needed to be done okay. In a 2009 Department of Homeland Security report, prepared by the government agency. Now, this is Homeland Security, Secretary Napolitano's group, a research arm for the U.S. Customs and Citizenship and Immigration Service, says this, quote, it's very important. We need to think about this, quote, virtually all immigration experts agree that it would be counterproductive to offer an explicit or implied path to permanent resident status or citizenship during any legalization program. That would simply encourage fraud and encourage illegal border crossings that other features of the program seek to discourage. In fact, for that reason and from that perspective, it would be best if the legislation did not even address future permanent resident status or citizenship. Close quote. And this is a government agency making a plainly commonsensical statement that's virtually undeniable if you think about it. A grant of amnesty, again, is going to be counterproductive, and it's the kind of thing that would incentivize actions that our policies are designed supposedly to discourage illegal entry into the United States. Indeed, increased legal entries into our country are happening right now. The numbers are going up. Just on hearing that there's an amnesty plan afoot, immigration illegality is increasing. According to the Border Patrol, so far in this year, 90,000 people illegally crossed the border and have been taken into custody. That's 50% more than last year. 55,000 of them, I would note, for those who are interested in this and recognize the international nature of it, 55,000 of the 90 are not Mexican nationals. So during markup, Senator Grassley offered an amendment to require the Secretary to certify to Congress that she has maintained effective control over the entire border for 6 months before amnesty begins. But it was rejected by a 12-6 vote. So we were told that the bill would have the toughest enforcement measures in the history of the United States, potentially in the world, and would fix the illegal immigration problem once and for all. Wouldn't that be great? That's one of the Gang of 8 members on National Meet the Press recently. Wouldn't that be good? I think that's something we should strive for, but does the legislation do it? Madam Chair, I see the Majority Leader. He approved my time this afternoon, and I have only so much of it left. I'm due to have the floor until 5. If there's, maybe I would note the absence of a quorum here if he'd like to talk about that.
We're going to swear in the new senator right now.
Madam President, I see there's important business to be done, and I would yield the floor.
Madam President. Madam President.
Majority Leader. The Majority Leader is recognized.
Madam President, I welcome Senator Chiesa to the United States Senate. I congratulate him on his appointment to fill the seat of the late Frank Lautenberg. Senator Chiesa, and I'm sure we'll struggle with that name for a little while until we get used to it, but I think I've done it just about right, has served Attorney General for the state of New Jersey. As Attorney General, he's done some really remarkable things. He's worked with law enforcement and the state legislature to combat human trafficking, to protect children from predators, crack down on gang violence. He implemented a successful gun buyback program that took 10,000 weapons off the streets, including 1,200 illegal guns. So I commend him for his efforts to keep New Jersey streets safe and protecting Americans from gun violence. And as we all know, that was something that was very close to Senator Lautenberg's heart. Prior to becoming Attorney General, he served for 2 years as Chief Counsel to New Jersey Governor Christie after leading the governor's transition team. He spent 7 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey and more than 10 years in private practice. He's graduated from the University of Notre Dame, got his law degree from Catholic University here in the District of Columbia, and certainly because of that is familiar with the District of Columbia. I'm confident he will serve the people of New Jersey with honor, and I welcome him to the United States Senate.
Mr. President, I'm just I had an opportunity to meet with Jeff Chiesa and his wife earlier today. I think the governor of New Jersey has made a wise appointment, and we look forward to working with him in the coming months.
Ready? The chair lays before the Senate a certificate of appointment to fill the vacancy created by the death of the late Senator Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey. The certificate, the chair is advised, is in the form suggested by the Senate. If there is no objection, the reading of the certificate will be waived and it will be printed in full in the record. There be no objection. If the senator designee will now present himself to the desk, the chair will administer the oath. Step right here.
Thank you.
Good to see you, boys. You did a great job. I'm just going to read the oath straight through. And you affirm, right? I swear. Yeah. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this oath of obligation, you take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations, Senator. Welcome to the United States Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much.
The senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I want to join the distinguished majority leader and the Republican leader in welcoming my new colleague from the great state of New Jersey, Jeff Chiesa, and his family to the United States Senate. I look forward to working with him closely on the issues of importance to New Jersey and to the nation. You've heard some of his exemplary milestones in his career. He is a career attorney and someone who has served in public service, certainly has the governor's confidence, as is evidenced by the time that he spent with him at the U.S. Attorney's Office, then in his transition, the governor's transition, which he led, as well as being his chief counsel and the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, for which he has had some extraordinary opportunities to both protect and promote the general welfare of the people of the state of New Jersey. Jeff's father was a chemical plant worker who died when he was 8 years old. So he and his two sisters were raised by his mother, who was a teacher. And I'm sure his family is very proud of him today as a father of two children. And they're extremely proud of him for all that he's done throughout his career, and particularly today as he becomes the newest member of the United States Senate. He was asked at the press conference with the governor, as the governor announced him as his designee, what did he intend to accomplish here in the Senate. Now, for those of us who have served in the Senate for a while, we know it takes a little time. In 5 months, that's a tough question to ask somebody what they're going to be able to accomplish in 5 months. But I think that Senator Chiesa comes at a time in which we're having some momentous debates in this nation. Certainly, as it is ongoing on immigration reform, he'll have an opportunity to cast some critical votes in that regard. I look forward to talking to him about some of those issues, as well as other critical issues that will come before the country over the next 5 months. So I look forward to working with him and on behalf of the people of the state of New Jersey and our nation. And I'm sure, even though it's only 5 months, he's going to make a significant mark here in the United States Senate. And with that, Madam President, I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
President,
Senator from Alabama.
I would ask consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
And Madam President, it's a delight for me to see this new administering of the oath to our new senator. And as a former federal prosecutor, I know he understands much of the federal laws that we deal with around here. And having been one of those myself, I welcome him here and believe there will be many gifts and experiences he's had from that role that will help him serve in the United States Senate, writing laws that will actually be the laws enforced by his former fellow prosecutors around the country. Madam President, a close examination of the legislation before us. This is it here. It's over 1,000 pages now. It's very hard to read, but you have to study it because it makes all sorts of references to except as provided by in this section and that section and subsection E2, I1, 3, and things like that. It's hard to read, but a close examination reveals that the promised enforcement of immigration law in the future that is so critical and the American people deserve, the American people have asked for decades, is not there. The triggers are not triggers at all, and in fact would actually weaken even current law, granting the Secretary of Homeland Security, now Secretary Napolitano in particular, unprecedented powers to determine how and when the border is secured, if ever. Remember, at this moment, the Secretary of Homeland Security is being sued by federal law officers, ICE officers, Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers of her own department, because they say she is issuing directives to them that keep them from complying with plain federal law. In other words, she is directing them not to comply with federal law, and the federal judge has taken the case and allowed it to go forward in taking testimony on it. What the bill really says at bottom is that illegal immigrants can receive amnesty not when the border is secured, but when the Secretary Napolitano tells Congress she is starting to try to secure the border. Within 6 months of enactment of the legislation, Secretary Napolitano need only submit to Congress her views on a comprehensive southern border strategy and a southern border fencing strategy. Her views on those, and give notice that she's begun implementing whatever plans she decides to implement. At that point, she may begin processing applications and granting the amnesty. Indeed, she will be doing that, without any border security or enforcement measures ever being required to be in place. And the reality is, once amnesty is granted, it's never going to be revoked. And enforcement is unlikely under this scheme ever to occur. And that is just like 1987, which Senator Grassley earlier today, ranking member on the Budget Committee from Iowa, who was here in 1987, says was a great failure at that time, and he voted for the bill. And he says it was a mistake. And it was a mistake because we didn't put in mechanisms to ensure that in the future the enforcement would actually occur. And that's why he opposes this bill. And Frank Cherry, the America's Voice advocate, activist, recently said about these triggers, and he just, again, he lets the cat out of the bag. Quote, the triggers are based on developing plans and spending money, not on reaching that effectiveness. In other words, not reaching an effective system of security in the future. It's not tied to that. And then he goes on to say, quote, which is really quite clever. Really clever, isn't it? to see if they can fool the American people. They've written something that looks like a real trigger, that has teeth in it, that says you don't get your amnesty and legal status until enforcement occurs. But when you read the bill, it's not there. And Mr. Sherry actually lays it out. In fact, in 2007, Senator Isaacson first came up with an idea of a trigger mechanism that gained popularity. I think he was the one that wrote the language that was in that bill. It's much stronger than this one. It was much stronger than what's in the bill today. Actually, it had the potential to really work. Remember, this was what was said when the bill was rolled out. Basically, they said, American people, we got a good bill. You can trust us. The enforcement will occur because we have triggers in the bill to guarantee that that it's enforced. Well, that's not so, is it? Does that not make you uneasy, colleagues? Shouldn't it make the American people uneasy when they've seen Congress time and time again avoid going forward with real law enforcement? The bill states that the southern border strategy should detail a plan for achieving and maintaining effective control, close quote, of the southern border. Effective control is a new word defined as, quote, persistent surveillance, close quote, which itself is not defined. Plus, quote, an effectiveness rate of 90% or higher, close quote. What effectiveness rate? So this is calculated by dividing the number of apprehensions and turnbacks in a sector during a fiscal year by the total number of illegal entries in the sector during that fiscal year. But this does not account for those who escaped detection by the Border Patrol. During her testimony, Secretary Napolitano all but acknowledged the effectiveness rate is meaningless because by definition the Department of Homeland Security has no idea how many people avoided detection. How can you have that formula? The measure is subject to almost limitless manipulation. One thing we all should remember, having been involved in this for a number of years now, the border should already be secure. It should already be secure. The Secure Fence Act of 2006, passed by both houses of Congress, already requires right now the Department of Homeland Security to maintain 100% operational control of all land and maritime borders and require the Homeland Security to do so within 18 months of the bill having been passed in 2006. But that mandate has been ignored, not complied with, and the border is certainly far from 100% under operational control. So we're going to pass a new bill that's even weaker than this and expect it's going to result in some major improvement in law enforcement? By contrast, the rejected 2007 immigration bill set a stronger target of 100% operational control of the entire border, which had to be met before illegal immigrants could be given the probationary legal status. The current bill is essentially the same as the failed 1986 bill. Its enforcement immediately and a promise of its legality immediately with a promise of enforcement in the future. And it's important to note that nothing in the bill prevents Secretary Napolitano from submitting a strategy. That's all she has to submit is a strategy that simply reiterates her publicly stated views about the border. She says, first, the border is more secure than it's ever been, close quote. And while the bill states that Homeland Security shall start, quote, the implementation of the plan, quote, immediately after, close quote, submission, and give notice to Congress of its commencement and provide reports on its progress, nothing in the bill actually requires the Secretary to implement anything. It just doesn't. It's not there. All she has to do is start the amnesty process, what she intends to do, and then to submit reports in the future. We've heard that there will be more fencing. You've heard that talk. The bill is going to make sure we have more fencing. But no language in the bill requires the Secretary to construct any fencing at all. Rather, the bill states that the Secretary shall submit to Congress within 6 months of enactment her views on a fencing plan to identify where fencing, if any, including double-layer fencing, infrastructure, technology, including ports of entry, should be deployed along the border. The problem is that Secretary Napolitano, who will be responsible for implementing these provisions, has said multiple times that no further fencing is necessary. And she recently testified before the Judiciary Committee that Homeland Security would prefer to rely on drones and high-tech surveillance. Quote, "We would prefer money if we have our druthers. We would not so designate a fence fund," close quote. Does it make more sense to use technology to observe people entering the country illegally, or does it make more sense to stop them from entering? Look, after the Secure Fence Act was passed, requiring 700 miles of double-layer fencing, passed by the United States Congress in 2006, after that passed, they said, well, we're not going to build double-layered 700 miles of fencing. We got a better idea. We're going to have a virtual fence. We're going to use technology and balloons and things of that nature. And we got this sophisticated plan. They spent $1 billion on that plan. Totally abandoned. A utter failure. That's what's upsetting the American people in this country. Promises are made. We're going to build a fence. We all vote for a fence. Then, oh, no, we're not going to build a fence. We got a better idea. Then we spend $1 billion and get zero for it. This is not necessary. We can make great improvements at the border if we have the will to do so. The will and determination is what's lacking. Proponents of the bill have repeatedly said this legislation contains the toughest border immigration enforcement measures in history. If that's the case, then why is the bill weaker than current law? Why is it weaker than in 2007, the bill that was offered and was rejected? Congress overwhelmingly passed the mandate to build a fence in 2006, and I was engaged in that debate, by 80 to 19 vote, with the support of then Senators Biden and Obama. Vice President Biden and President Obama, they voted for it. It hadn't come close to have been built. I think we have 30 miles of fencing having been completed when the bill called for 700. If we'd done that, we'd be in a lot better place to ask the American people today, let's be compassionate and see if we can't do something kind to people who've entered our country illegally. A Rasmussen's poll in April of this year, a substantial majority of Americans want the fence built, but Congress has failed to do so. The bill would authorize $8 billion in initial funding to carry out all of its provisions, and you notice it has some fencing language in there. $1.5 billion. But what is the $1.5 billion for? Is it to build a fence? And you can build a lot of fence with that much money. No. It's for the developing of a fencing strategy. And there are other things that money would be spent for, too. But in fact, a fence does save money. Since the fence is a force multiplier, fewer Border Patrol agents will be needed. They can cover more miles, and it reduces cost. It makes a clear statement to the world that the United States is serious. Our borders are no longer open. Don't come illegally. If you do, we're going to apprehend you, and you will be disciplined in some fashion and deported. If we do that, we'll see a dramatic reduction in the number of people coming to our country illegally. During our Judiciary Committee markup on this legislation, further making the no fences rule without a doubt. An amendment was sponsored by Senator Leahy and was adopted that says nothing in this provision, quote, shall require the Secretary to install fencing, close quote, if the Secretary, in her discretion, determines that fencing is not necessary. And, of course, she says she doesn't favor more fencing. In addition, the amendment requires that the Secretary consult with the Secretaries of Interior, Agriculture, states, local governments, Indian tribes, property owners, before she could ever build a fence, and to minimize the impact on the environment, culture, commerce, and quality of life for residents. Well, you always try to do those things, but all of this is an indication that with regard to the question of barriers and fencing to enhance the lawfulness at our border, this bill doesn't do it. Actually, this bill is hostile to it. Can you see that language in there? This was discussed at Judiciary. It passed in the committee. Well, only 36.3 miles of the fencing out of the 700 has ever been completed. Had the rest of it been completed, we would be in a lot better shape today. And we're told that if in 5 years the Secretary's Border Security Plan has not reached 100% awareness and 90% apprehension, the Department of Homeland Security will lose control of the issue and it will be turned over to the border governors to finish the job, close quote. That was Senator Rubio and a Mark Levin show. But this commission they talk about at the border, mere existence is left to the sole discretion of the Secretary of Homeland Security, only if she determines that Homeland Security, her own department, quote, has not achieved effective control of the border, close quote. 5 years after enactment. So wait 5 years. If she hadn't done the job, and she certifies she's failed to do the job, and after the legalization has already been granted, it's then entirely up to the Secretary to determine whether her plans are, quote, substantially completed and substantially implemented. Then and only then will the Southern Border Commission be formed. And the bill proponents claim that the commission would be a powerful and important policy-making body, close quote, and that the Secretary of Homeland Security will be compelled to implement the commission's recommendations. That was one of the Gang of Eight's news release. Not so. The commission is empowered only to make recommendations to the President, the Secretary, and Congress, which are then to be reviewed by the Comptroller General. Nothing in the bill requires any of the commission's recommendations to be implemented. They don't have any power. Once it makes its recommendations, the commission dissolves in 30 days. Kaput. As Byron York noted in the Washington Examiner in his column today, quote, there's nothing in the bill requiring the commission to finish the job of border security, and indeed it would have no authority to do so, close quote. Indeed, it has no authority to do anything, really, except issue a report. Now, the second issue that deals with the illegality in our country is the visa question. We were told that the path to citizenship in the bill would be contingent upon tracking whether illegal immigrants have left the country when required. That has a plain meaning. Have they left when required? Under current law, we have a mechanism where people are fingerprinted and they are identified when they come into the country. There's just no clocking out when they leave the country. Well, so what does the bill do? Does it fix that problem? Let's look at the history of it. The bill rolls back the requirements in current law, laws that were passed on 6 different occasions by Congress since 1996 for a biometric exit system. We have a biometric entry system at some points, but not an exit system. Yet instead of forcing the administration's hand, making this happen, this bill gives in to the executive branch's obstinacy over at least 2 administrations and provides for only an electronic, not biometric, exit system and only at air and sea ports, not land ports. It's estimated that nearly 40% of the illegal population here today are visa overstays. GAO, our Government Accountability Office, has repeatedly said that a system like the one called for in this bill will not reliably identify visa overstays, and that without a biometric exit system, quote, DHS cannot ensure the integrity of the immigration system by identifying and removing those people who have overstayed the original period of admission, close quote. So that's the Government Accountability's objective, nonpartisan analysis of the legislation. Beyond violating our laws, visa overstays pose a substantial threat to national security. Visa overstayers come from all over the world. The 9/11 Commission, after 9/11 attacks, recommended that, quote, the Department of Homeland Security, properly supported by Congress, should complete as quickly as possible a biometric exit entry system, close quote. In a report entitled the 10th Anniversary Report Card, the status of 9/11 recommendations, they came back together to see how well their recommendations had been carried out. They praised the fact that we have an entry system, a biometric entry system known as U.S. Visit, and it's been proven to be valuable, they say, as a national security tool. But despite the successful deployment of the entry component of U.S. Visit, the Commission notes, quote, there is still no comprehensive exit system in place. As important as it is to know when foreign nationals arrive, it's also important to know when they leave. Full deployment of the biometric exit component of U.S. Visit should be a high priority. Such a capability would have assisted law enforcement and intelligence officials in August and September of 2001 in conducting a search for 2 of the hijackers.
Senator's time has expired.
Thank the chair. I believe 5 o'clock has arrived, and I would yield the floor. And I would say thank you to the managers of the agriculture bill. I know you've worked hard on it.
Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of S-954, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 73, S-954, a bill to reauthorize agricultural programs through 2018.
Under the previous order, the time until 5:30 p.m. will be equally divided and controlled between the 2 leaders or their designees.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
I see the distinguished senator from North Dakota on the floor, Senator Heitkamp's first farm bill. We are about ready to vote on. She has been an extraordinary voice, really hit the ground running. We're very proud of her, and it's my pleasure to yield her 5 minutes.
Madam President.
Senator from North Dakota.
I would first like to thank the incredible leadership of the great senator from the state of Michigan. I met her over a year ago and knew that she was a force to be reckoned with, not only because she has red hair, but because she is someone who understands that to move something forward, we need to have compromise, and we need to understand that this is a farm bill that represents the interests of the entire country, not just the interest of maybe the Great Plains states or the southern states or even our urban areas that care desperately about nutrition, but that we need to forge a bill that can pass both chambers and that can keep our country moving. And the fact of the matter is, Madam President, that agriculture is a shining star in the American economy today. If you look at states like North Dakota and Nebraska and Kansas and South Dakota, all ag-based states, you will see that we did not have the deep trough of this recession because agriculture did pretty well. Why did agriculture do pretty well? Because the last Farm Bill that was crafted provided an appropriate balance of concern for our long-term fiscal obligations along with providing our producers with a legitimate and appropriate safety net. And so we have a Farm Bill today that I think is even better, that we are going to be voting on. Why is it better? Because it not only provides that certainty and that safety net for American producers, the backbone historically of our economy, provides not only that certainty, but it reduces the deficit $24 billion. By eliminating a process of direct payments, by cutting some unnecessary expenditures, by streamlining conservation, and by taking a look at a rational and reasonable approach to some of the issues regarding nutrition. And so I am very, very proud today to stand before this body. One of my first votes, not the first vote, but one of my first votes, doing what is absolutely essential to the North Dakota economy, and that is passing a Farm Bill. And so just to give you an idea of North Dakota, because we like to brag, because people forget about North Dakota as an agricultural state because so much attention has been focused in recent months and recent years on our dramatic energy development that we have. But I want to just give you a rundown on what we do in North Dakota when you look at our production. We're #1 in barley. We're #1 in beans, dried and edible. We're #1 in navies. We're #1 in pinto beans. We're #1 in canola. We're #1 in flaxseed and honey. We're #1 in lentils and dry edible peas. We're #1 in all forms of sunflowers. And we're #1 in durum wheat and spring wheat. And we're #2 in sugar beets, and we're #2 in all wheat. And so 90% of North Dakota's 90% of North Dakota's land base is engaged in agriculture. It's the backbone of what we do. And as we talk about the importance of public policy, not only to protect our producers and give them opportunities for certainty, I want to talk about two unique things that I'm exceptionally proud of. And the first is that this crop insurance program will provide the safety net that so many of our young farmers in our states need to get engaged in the business of farming. Why is that important? 10 years ago, when I was still in elected office, I would go to farm meetings and I would look around the table and everybody was in their 50s and 60s and a 50-year-old farmer would be a young farmer. And now we go to those same meetings and sitting around that table are 20 and 30 and 40-year-old farm families saying we want to engage in the business of agriculture, and that's good for the world because we not only need to produce our products for America, we need to produce our products for the entire world. And so this is a farm bill that I think strikes the right balance. It is a farm bill that addresses the priorities not only of my state, but hopefully the priorities of this country. 16 million jobs, 16 million American jobs depend on this bill. The second point I want to make about this bill that I think people remind me occasionally that it is a year late because we've already gone to one extension. But since I've been here, it is a bill that will send the message to the American people that we need to provide a certainty once and for all. We need to do things in a timely fashion, and I think moving this farm bill right now is moving it in a timely fashion. I think this is an excellent, excellent piece of legislation, and I urge all of my colleagues to vote for it. And I thank the chairwoman from Michigan for her excellent and exceptional leadership, along with her ranking member, Senator Cochran, who has been so instrumental in forging the compromises that make today possible. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to take a moment before we vote today to recognize folks that have worked so hard to get us to this point. And first of all, thank my colleagues in advance for coming together one more time and leading for rural America, for farmers, for ranchers, for the 16 million people that have a job because of agriculture in this country. It's been a long road for the Agriculture Reform, Food and Jobs Act, and I have been so blessed and pleased to have the wonderful partner and ranking member, the distinguished senator from Mississippi, as my partner every step of the way, and I want to thank him. Look forward as we move forward. Hopefully the House this time will complete their work, and we will have the opportunity to go to conference and craft an agreement that we will then present back to the Senate. But I can't thank Senator Cochran enough and the staff for their wonderful partnership. We started last year. We had 3 weeks that the Farm Bill was on the floor of the Senate. We had 73 votes and adopted 42 amendments. And we took that as the basis of the bill this year. Once the House did not take up the bill, and in my judgment walked away from rural America last year, we had to come back and do it again. So we used that work product that the Senate did last year as the basis of our work. And we've had 2 weeks of debate on the floor of the United States Senate. We've added 14 more amendments to the bill that is in front of us. So I want to thank first the Majority Leader for his hard work and leadership and patience. As always, he knows how important agriculture is to our economy, how important it is to support rural communities and families, consumers around our country. I appreciate that he has not just once but twice given us precious time on the Senate floor so that we could do our job in standing up for rural America and for consumers across this country. I'm proud that we once again voted, or are about to vote today, in a bipartisan way to move this bill forward. This bill has been bipartisan from start to finish, and I believe that's the reason for our success, and I'm grateful to colleagues who have worked in such a diligent way on both sides of the aisle. There are many leaders on both sides of the aisle on this bill. We wouldn't be here today without leadership on both sides of the aisle, and I'm very, very grateful for that. This is how the Senate's designed to work, where people who care very deeply on both sides of an issue can sit down, in our case, around a table in the Senate Agriculture Room, look each other in the eye, talk to each other, listen, make the compromises necessary to come together with a balanced bill, and that's what we did. Last year we passed the Farm Bill, as I said before, in a bipartisan way as well. The House Agriculture Committee passed a bipartisan Farm Bill last year, but for whatever reason, the full House didn't consider the bill. It was allowed to expire. But the good news is this year it looks like it's going to be different, Madam President. That's good news for rural America and the men and women who work hard every day to give us the safest, most affordable, most abundant food supply in the world. I want to thank my incredible staff who have done this now for not once but twice, because we engaged and had a work product when the Super Committee Deficit Commission was operating. We've actually done this 3 times, and I think they could do farm bills in their sleep. Hopefully they've not been sleeping when they've been writing this one, but we are, I'm very grateful for their leadership. I want to thank Chris Adamo, my terrific staff director for the Agriculture Committee, who is living and breathing these issues every minute and only takes occasional breaks to go fly fishing in Michigan. We have a historic agreement on conservation and crop insurance in this bill, thanks to his leadership and our team. Jonathan Kompas, our chief counsel, Joe Schultz, our economist extraordinaire who understand the ins and outs of agriculture like nobody else, and who have done so much as we transition in this bill towards market-based risk management tools for our farmers. Jonathan Cordone, our general counsel, who crossed every T and dotted every I in this bill, and frankly, Madam President, there are a lot of them. He's been keeping track of all the amendments and making sure this process runs smoothly. Carla Tiemann, who leads our livestock and dairy issues and has helped make the energy title something we could really be proud of. I'm very grateful for all of her leadership and hard work. Tina May, who wrote our original conservation title and then decided to go have a baby. And she's amazing. She knows more about conservation than anyone I know, and we're very proud that not only the conservation title in the Senate, but one that is very similar in the House, bears the marks of her hard work and leadership. And I do want to note that Jonathan Coppice had a son during the last Farm Bill, and Tina had a son during this Farm Bill. So I'm not sure what it is about Farm Bills, Madam President, but we'll see what comes next. One thing about Tina's maternity leave is that it allowed us to get the T2 team back together. Kevin Norton came back from the USDA to work with Katie Lee as they picked up very excellently the heavy load and made it look easily. Thanks to them, our country will have healthy wildlife habitats and clean fishable waters for generations to come. Jacqueline Snyder, who is another one of our Farm Bill veterans who ably leads our nutrition team, has done such a wonderful job, has done so much for the diversity of American agriculture through organics, fruits and vegetables, and all the things we call specialty crops, as well as Jess Taylor. Jessie has done terrific work in partnership as well. Brandon McBride led our efforts to reorganize Rural Development Title and worked so hard this year to make sure the energy title continued to grow the economy in rural America. Russ Benheim. Russ is our expert on technology issues, biotechnology issues, on crop protection, has lent very important expertise to our efforts, and I'm grateful. Corey Clausen, who led our efforts on dairy last year, and whose hard work led to the major advances we've made in this bill for beginning farmers and ranchers, as well as for our veterans who want to get into agriculture. I'm very proud, Madam President, that in our bill we have a new agricultural liaison for our veterans. So many of our men and women coming home are from small communities around America, and they want to have the opportunity to go into farming. We want to help them be able to do that. Corey's also leading our CFTC efforts, so Corey's work is just getting started. And Hannah Abu El-Sayed, who kept the trains running on time, and Hannah made sure we were all prepared and prepped. No easy job as well. Alexis Stanchuk and Kyle Varner, who, as the newest member of our team, have once again done a great job, whatever needed to be done in order to help us be successful. Jesse Williams, Nicole Hertenstein, Jacob Cheney, our entire great team on the committee have helped us, Madam President, to get to this point. I also want to say thank you to my Chief of Staff, Dan Farrell, who manages our personal office, Matt Van Kuyken, my terrific legislative director, who's followed the floor procedures and makes sure everything was happening as it should. My great Deputy Chief of Staff, Bill Sweeney, Colin Schwartz, my Communications Director, Ben Becker, our Press Secretary, who made sure that we were telling the story of rural America and this Farm Bill and the reforms in it every day. We couldn't have done it without them and our entire team, Matt Williams, Will Eberly, and Alex Berger. I want to thank my state team, all of our outreach efforts led by the outstanding Teresa Plahetka, Kelly Fox, Mary Judnich, Brandon Fewens, Corey Hall, making sure that Michigan is truly represented on every page. This was a bipartisan effort, and I want to thank everyone on Senator Cochran's team, especially T.A. Hawks and James Glick for their leadership. Once again, Doug Elmendorf's CBO farm team came through, thanks to Jim Langley and everyone on their team. I want to thank Casey Gillette from Senator Reid's office, who is a part of our extended family. It's great working with her again. This is like a second annual family reunion, always having Casey with us. Nothing could get done around here without our excellent floor staff, who've been led by Gary Myrick and Tim Mitchell, and thank you to everybody on our team for their very long hours as usual. And of course, we wouldn't have had anything to pass without the amazing expertise of our Legislative Council team, Michelle Johnson-Wider and Gary Endicott, for their invaluable assistance. And last but not least, the great team at the USDA and what I believe is an absolutely terrific Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and his General Counsel's office. There are so many people to thank. I will stop. There are other colleagues that wish to speak. I just want everyone to know that when you take basically 12 different chapters or titles, any one of which could be its own piece of legislation, and put it together in something called a 5-year Farm Bill, it happens because of a tremendous amount of talent and experience and hard work. And it happens because, in our case, we have what I believe is the most seasoned Agriculture Committee, former chairs, former Secretary of Agriculture. We have people who know agriculture deeply and care about it deeply, and with so much talent and experience, it's been a real privilege and continues to be to chair this committee. Madam President, this Farm Bill is the product of 2 years of hard work by a long list of talented people, and as we vote today, we support 16 million people that depend on agriculture for their jobs. We are providing $24 billion in deficit reduction on a bipartisan basis. We are providing policies that will conserve our land and our water resources for generations to come, that help families who have fallen on hard times keep food on the tables for their children, a bill that helps our veterans get started in agriculture, that supports our small towns all across America, and recognizes the diversity of American agriculture and strengthens efforts to give families the opportunity to buy fresh, local food in their supermarkets and have it available in their schools. This Farm Bill creates jobs. I'm very proud of the work that we have done, and I ask all of our colleagues to support us in voting yes today on this bill.
Madam President.
Senator, I believe Senator Klobuchar, I believe, was next. I would yield 5 minutes to Senator Klobuchar, and then if my ranking member, but if he is interested, or we will then turn to Senator Nelson. So,
thank you very much,
Senator from
Senator
Minnesota.
Madam President, I rise today in support of this very important bill, and of course I wanted to thank Senator Stabenow for her leadership, as well as the senator from Mississippi. It was a true bipartisan effort, and as I heard her list all